Hello there, welcome to Craft with Fee. Well, we're here. It is week 1 of the Woodland fabric stitch along. We're going to be doing this for 10 weeks. So every Sunday for 10 weeks, we're going to come to you with a brand new project using these gorgeous fabrics. So what I want you to do this week is to choose one of the colour families. Now, when I say the colour families, you'll note that the TILDA Woodland fabrics come in purples, greens, blues, there's some grey and reds. Now I've decided to go with the red family this time. So we need to choose 4 fabrics. And as I said, I have chosen these 4. Now we're going to be making a little, I'm going to call it a table mat. So it is just going to be a little mat which is 8 inches by 12 inches unfinished. So obviously it'll be smaller once we do our seams. So you will need a piece of natural hanky linen because I think that the natural hanky linen looks absolutely stunning with the reds. You can decide whether or not it's the white that you use for yours or the natural, but I'm going with the natural. So once again, it's 8 inches by 12 inches. You will also need to have a piece of wadding, whether or not it's a fusible one or just a normal batting, that's up to you. That will need to be the same size. You will also need to choose one of these fabrics as your backing. Now, I've gone with the lovely, I suppose it's a woodland scene. I suppose that's what you'd call it. It's a gorgeous woodland scene. So that needs to be the same measurement as well. So that's also 8 inches by 12 inches. And that's going to be my backing. Now, even though it's a backing, that doesn't mean that it's a second-class citizen. It just... it sort of means that I'm going to be able to appreciate this gorgeous piece of fabric every time I pick up my little table mat. But of course, you can use a normal fabric on the back if you don't want to waste any. But I'm happy to use that one on the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our wadding and fuse it, if you've got a fusible one, to your fabric here. And we can just fuse that, and then we're just going to set that aside for the moment. And then I'm going to get you to download the template sheet, which has a beautiful little heart on it. And I've already traced it off there and ironed it onto the fabric. But all you need to do is to use some applique paper. Now, applique paper has a rough side and it has a paper side. So the idea of it is that you can pop your pattern sheet underneath, and then you can use a pencil or a pen or whatever it is that you want to use, and you can trace your shape onto the paper side of your applique paper. You then need to cut around it roughly, so leaving, a little bit around the edge like I have here. You can see there's quite a bit left all around the edge. And then we're going to take it over to the ironing board, and we're going to fuse it to some fabric on the wrong side. Now, I've used a piece of one of the fabrics, and I've decided to go with the one that I've used for the backing because I had a nice strip there left off the backing, so that's what I'm using. And what I need you to do is to cut 6 hearts. Okay, so we're going to do six little hearts. Now, obviously this one looks a little bit different to the others. I'm fine with that. That's going to be okay. All right, so we're going to then cut around our paper side where we've drawn the heart with a nice pair of sharp scissors. And it's just simply a matter of just cutting out the heart. It's pretty easy to do. So there you go. So there you've got your heart. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we are going to measure about 1 inch from the bottom of our little table mat on either end. Okay, so when you've got your 1 inch mark, then we're just going to fold it over, and we're just going to sort of finger press it just so that we get a line which is at 1 inch. You can see there, that's at about 1 inch. Now you can do it with a hot iron, but we don't want to make it too permanent. So it's a lot easier to do it just with your finger. Just the warmth from your finger on the fabric will give you just that nice little crease. And then we're going to fold it in half the other way. And on that area here, we're just going to give it a little bit more of a press. And then that is going to give us the halfway mark. And that is where we are going to line up our first heart. So we're going to pop that on that section there. So now we need to remove the paper from the back of our little heart, and you just peel it off, and then you should be able to see, hopefully you can see the shine there. That is the glue from the applique paper that is now on the back of your fabric. So you can place your heart down there, which is the halfway mark. So you line up the point of your heart with that 1 inch mark that we've made, and we are just going to pop that heart in the center. Now we know it's the center because we've found the center of our fabric. So then we are just going to remove the paper from another heart, and then you can just eyeball this one and do it at around, you know, a nice, like a sort of distance from the middle heart, and then we're going to do exactly the same with our third heart. Now you can get all technical and measure this, or you can just eyeball it. Keeping in mind you're going to lose 1/4 inch from either side of your table mat once you do your seams. So just keep that in mind. So then you just take this over to the ironing board and you give it a nice hot fuse, and then these hearts will be glued down. But we will need to stitch them down in some form. So you have a few options there. You can stitch around it with a straight stitch on your machine. You can use a matching thread or a contrast thread. You can use a blanket stitch on your machine and you can blanket stitch around it. Or you can do some handwork and you can use 2 strands of embroidery thread in a matching colour, and you can blanket stitch around them. So you'll need to do that to all 3 of the hearts. Then we're going to turn our table mat around and we're going to do exactly the same thing on the other end. So we're going to go over by 1 inch, find the halfway point and pop our hearts along. So if you go and do that and get them stitched down, and then we'll come back and do the next stage. And there we go, our little hearts are all stitched down. I've decided to do mine on the machine. I've done them quite roughly. I quite like that look. So that's what we've gone with. Okay, so now take those 4 fabrics that you originally have chosen, and from the end of each you can cut off a 2.5 inch strip. Now your fat eighth will measure 10 inches in length, so you just cut it across 2.5 inches. So just take your ruler, line up the 2.5 inch mark, and then just zoom along with your rotary cutter, and then you can cross cut those strips into 2.5 inch squares. Now you need to make 10 of those, so you can decide which of the fabrics that you want to cut and make your 10 squares with. And I'll show you what we're going to do. We're going to make some prairie points. So this is what we're going to do. So I've done them on one end already, so I'm going to show you how you make them. So you'd actually take one of your 2.5 inch squares that you've got there, and then you fold it in half so that the points are matching. So just turn it over, wrong sides together, and then just press it so you've got a nice neat edge. And then you just fold it in half again. So make sure that those points are matching there. Give it a nice press, and then you have what we call a prairie point. Now you're going to need 10, so you'll need 5 for each end. I'm making my ends exactly the same, so they're going to have one of these ones in the center, which is going to line up with that heart there. And then next I've taken this fabric here, and then I've got this fabric here on the end. Now a prairie point will have an open side and it will have a closed side. So you need to make sure that they're all going in the same direction. So mine here on the bottom, I've got my folded edge going that way. So I'm going to make sure that I've got them going the same way. And I'm just going to, just for now, just pin that one there in the middle. And then we're going to pop in the next ones. So we need to make sure the folded edge is going in that direction again. So we're going to then tuck the next one behind the one we've got in before and on top of, so it's sort of sitting like so. Now you can just pop them on so that they are nice and even. Now the reason why we aren't going right to the edge is because we need to turn this. We need to sew it around and we're going to turn it, and if we have the prairie points going right to the edge, we won't be able to turn our corners. So we're going to leave it around about 1/2 inch from the edge there. So you can see that I've got those sort of placed sort of evenly. And then I'm going to pop these ones in here. So we're going to open up the flap of this one and tuck this one over the top. And then you can just sort of move them along to try and get the same sort of gap in between your prairie points, like I have. Okay, so I can just have a look at my other side and make sure I've got it sort of lined up similar. Doesn't look too bad. And then what we're going to do, once we've got them all pinned down, and you can just imagine that I've got these pinned, we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew across the top with about a 1/8 seam so that it gets hidden later on. So you can see here, I haven't gone right to the 1/4 inch, I've just gone along here about 1/8 of an inch in, and it's holding the prairie points in place, but it's not going to be the permanent seam. It'll get hidden later on. So do that on both ends, and then we'll come back. And there we go, we've got our prairie points all sewn down on either edge. What we're going to do next is we're going to take our piece of backing with our wadding fused on. Now, if you don't have fusible wadding, you can lay the wadding down over the top and just pin it in place. And so what we're going to do is we're going to clip or pin, or whichever is your preferred method of basting these together, and we are going to match them all up, and we're going to sew around all 4 sides. But we are going to leave a gap in one of these long edges, and we're going to leave about a 3-inch gap. So that's 1, 2, 3 inches. So just in the middle of one side, we're just going to leave that 3-inch gap so that we've got somewhere to turn. So once you've sewn all the way around, we'll come back and we'll clip the edges, and then we will turn it. And there we go, I've sewn all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam, and we've got a little opening here. I think I might have left a little bit. Oh no, it's just around about 3 inches, a tiny little bit less. I was a bit naughty and I didn't mark it. Okay, we're going to get our fingernail and we're going to cover up our stitching in the corner, and then we're just going to snip. We're going to do that in all of the corners because we want it to get a nice, neat, flush corner when it comes time to turn. We'll just get all of those out of the way. And we're going to get, I'm just getting my trusty little paintbrush, which I use all the time, and we're going to turn this in the right way. So get up to your top corner first, the closest one, and then pull it through. So 3 inches is sort of enough so that you're not going to be trying to tease the fabric through the hole too much, but it's not a gaping great big hole either. So we'll just get this next corner here. If I can get my finger in there. There we go. And don't worry too much about the corners at this stage. We'll poke them out in a moment. Okay. So we'll go up and get these corners. You can see there we've got a nice right angle happening there. Now the prairie points don't go right to the end. If you're a more experienced sewer, you can sort of measure back 1/4 of an inch from the edge before you put your prairie points down and go right to that point. But I'm trying to do this so that beginners can accomplish our finished product as well, and I figured it would be just as easy if the prairie points don't go right to the end. They still look nice, and everyone's going to get a nice neat finish. But if you want to go that one step further and go right to the corner, you will need to just measure back 1/4 of an inch because that's where your seam's going to be. But I did not want to confuse the issue. Okay, so now I'm going to take this over to the ironing board. I'm going to give it a good press. Whilst I'm pressing it, I'm then going to press down this seam here at the edge so that you can't see it. And there we go, it's beautifully pressed. We've got our nice corners there, and we've got our little seam there which has been ironed, almost closed. So I'm just going to use a couple of little clips here now just to keep it shut. And then we're going to take this over to the machine and we can top sew all the way around. Now, if you don't like the top sewn look and you don't want to top sew around the top of your little mat, that's okay. You can just slip stitch this closed. But I am actually going to do that because it makes your prairie points sit down really nicely. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back and show you the finished mat. And there we go. There's our beautiful little table mat all finished. It's got the beautiful woodland scene on the back there. So you could, of course, turn it over if you wanted to and have the gorgeous woodland scene face up, or then you can just have the other plain side. I'm going to pop mine on my dressing table with a beautiful candle in the middle. So there you go. I hope that you've enjoyed the first tutorial in our woodland stitch along. I'll be back next week with something special to show you. See you then. Bye for now.